I think that the storm, the Sandy storm, has certainly created a lot of damage to a lot of areas in the shore region. Damage to us in Lakewood. I had a tree fall in my house, and I have $35,000 to $40,000 worth of damage. 7 weeks later, I still haven't gotten settled with my insurance company. I still don't have a check, so I'm sitting there with the rest of the people. Except I can still live in my house. I'm fortunate, unlike many people that can't. I think there has to be a better understanding of what insurance covers. People just don't. I don't understand. This is a flood. This is not covered. This isn't covered. It never flooded before. Do I need flood insurance? I mean, there has to be a better understanding so people understand what kind of insurance they should have. Keep in mind is that flood insurance doesn't cover contents. So even if you had flood insurance, it doesn't take care of the computer you lost, it doesn't take care of the couch, the rugs, all the other interior stuff, or clothing or anything else you have, and start to realize how much money it takes to replace all that. I also think that many people that didn't have mortgages were unaware of what was going to happen. And we have a real travesty that's happening down the shore area. If you had flood insurance, it's only $250,000. And even people who had flood insurance are having trouble getting those claims settled, partially because of the magnitude. We have to be realistic about that, but it's also difficult. Secondly, if you didn't have flood insurance, the max you're going to get is $31,000. What about the person that has a mortgage, has several $100,000 worth of damage, and is going to get $31,000? How are they going to be able to rebuild? Our big fear, we're going to have people walk away from these homes. And then it's going to take a couple of years for the banks to foreclose on them. What happens? How does the town deal with that? We have also a big problem headed up about rateables. The largest section of rateables in Ocean County has been the shore communities. If you take a look at the Barrier Islands, that's where you had the multi-million-dollar homes and things like that. Millions and millions of dollars of county rateables and revenue came from that. What's going to happen? It's not going to be there next year. So we're into some tough times in Ocean and Monmouth County based on just tax collection that's going to happen in the Barrier Island towns and how that's going to affect all of us in the county and how we're going to have to make that up. And that's a grave concern to all of us. And lastly, what we have to do in the future. Do we have to change building codes? Do we have to make them better than they are right now for the Barrier Islands? Do we have to say there are areas that should not be rebuilt? Do we have to look at that? And lastly, what do we have to do about insurance? Helping people understand insurance and make sure they have the proper insurance. A lot of unanswered questions, a lot of things we have to look at. It's also something we have to look at is how the power companies perform, and that's something that's been disgraceful. JCPL, major problem. We heard from so many companies from outside the state that came in to help that, for example, in some of the substations, the equipment was so antiquated they couldn't fix it, they had to replace it. That many of the power lines should have been replaced years ago, that the tree cutting was inadequate and improper. No question about it, the response from JCPL locally was terrible. Mayors and police departments and first aid and fire companies couldn't get hold of them. So we're going to have to take a hard look at that, and there will be legislation to correct that. We cannot allow that to happen again. I have a piece of legislation in best practice asking the BPU to take a look at all power companies across the country, especially those in shore regions, and see what best practice is adopted. Adopt that in New Jersey, require them to replace substations and wires at a certain period of time, making sure they better cut trees than they have been in the past, making sure that certain areas that should be underground are underground. All those kind of things. Adopt it, make sure that every power company in the state has to adopt it, and then revisit it every 6 months to make sure they're doing that. Having better cooperation when there's a storm between JCPL or PSE&G or any of those companies with the local police, fire, and first aid squads, and things can be done better. So I think there's a lot of work ahead of us. I certainly want to be in the forefront of that because I am a shore legislator, because many people were seriously affected. Take a look at those of us in Lakewood, how many days we were out with power. Our downtown was underground service without a power for 12 days. Think about the businesses downtown and people that live downtown, how horrific that was. Think about the fact that Route 9 was knocked out for almost 12 days and how difficult it was crossing the major thoroughfare in our towns and throughout Howell and Lakewood, which are in our district. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. We certainly have just begun, but we certainly have to have accountability, and certainly the power companies will be accountable for what happened.